Hi guys, Olive here. Here today to finally do the fiction section of my book haul. When I was going to film this originally, I ended up getting very sick, but now that I am feeling better, I am ready to show you all the fiction that I have acquired over the past few months. I will start off by showing you a book that I picked up because I have heard a ton of booktubers rave about it over the years. That is Perfume, the story of a murderer by Patrick Suskind. This is set in 18th century France, and in it we follow a man who was born with an extraordinary sense of smell. He becomes involved in a murder when he encounters a young woman whose scent is unsurpassed. This sounds so sensory and so creepy, and I'm here for it. Another book I picked up after seeing it on a few different booktube channels is English Animals by Laura Kay. I believe a few of the British booktubers read and really enjoyed this one. I think it was Lauren from Lauren in the Books who I saw read it fairly recently. This is about a Slovakian woman who believes that she's taking a job as an au pair for an English couple, but instead she becomes a taxidermy assistant and helps them with their many business ventures. It seems really quaint, but also very engaging. The next book I less picked up and more inherited from my husband after he was done reading it. That is The Child Finder by Renee Denfeld. This is the first in a new mystery series that she's writing, and in it we follow an investigator who is tasked with finding a little girl who went missing in the forest while she and her family were all picking out a Christmas tree. I obviously really trust my own husband's taste, so I'm excited to read this one. The next book I picked up because it seemed to be a secret history-esque type of novel, and we all know I'm really into those. That book is called The Zero and the One by Ryan Ruby. In this book, a shy, bookish young man named Owen starts attending classes at Oxford, but starts to get lessons on life's experiences, including the shady ones, from the rich, charismatic fellow student, Zach. I love a good campus novel, and will probably feel inspired to pick this one up in the fall. This next one was on my wish list for quite a long time. That is The Understory by Pamela Ahrens. This book is set in New York City, as well as a Buddhist monastery in rural Vermont. We follow a man now living in this monastery, but looking back on his life spent in the city, doing the same thing day after day. It seems psychological and more than a little somber, which definitely appeals to me. Another book I've had my eye on for quite a while is Moonlight, Melodies of Copper and Pine by Alexandria Nolan. Back when my channel was in its infancy, I read another book by this indie author called Starlight Symphonies of Oak and Glass, which was a magical historical novel set on Mackinac Island in Michigan. I believe this book is supposed to be a sequel to that one, or at least connected to it somehow. I really enjoyed that book, and I really enjoy supporting indie authors, so I'm looking forward to this one. But a book that I picked up that is set in my own city of Pittsburgh is The Blues Walked In by Kathleen George. I follow a lot of the literary goings-on here in Pittsburgh, and this book has been widely discussed. This book is set in 1936 when a young jazz musician comes home from being on tour with her orchestra. In Pittsburgh's Hill District, she meets two like-minded young people, starts singing in more and more clubs, and begins to get media attention. I'm really excited for this, not only because I've not read a whole lot of books set in Pittsburgh, but also because this is all about jazz music, so it's just ringing all of my bells. Another book I'm pretty confident I'm going to enjoy is A Station on the Path to Somewhere Better by Benjamin Wood. This is set in 1995, and we follow an estranged father and son who go on a road trip together. It seems to be a chance to repair their relationship, but of course, past trauma is going to resurface. Benjamin Wood's second novel, The Ecliptic, was actually my favorite novel of 2016, and it seems that this one is going to be just as twisty and psychological as that one was. A book that I got out of the library when it first came out, but never ended up finishing, is Smoke by Dan Valletta. It's a dreary book set in an alternative Victorian England where having any kind of impure or sinful thoughts will cause gray smoke to be emitted from your body. I've always been really curious to see how this one ends. The next book is not only gorgeous, but has a really intriguing premise. That is What Should Be Wild by Julia Fine. Our main character is a young woman who was cursed with the ability to kill or resurrect living things with the slightest touch. It seems like a darker version of the TV show Pushing Daisies, if anyone has ever watched that show. I love that show. I know Amy Poole really enjoyed this one, and I've been really excited to pick it up ever since I saw her rave about it. Another book I've heard really good things about is The House of Impossible Beauties by Joseph Cassara. This is set in the 1980s in the Harlem ball scene and in the drag worlds. It's about 17-year-old Angel, who along with a dancer named Hector form the first all-Latino house in the ball circuit and create family out of a handful of strangers. It sounds like nothing I've ever read before, but I am really excited to read it. I've heard some mixed reviews on this next one, but I do want to give it a try and see what I think of it. That is The Revolution of Morna by Janet Fitch, who is the author of White Oleander, which is another book that I still really need to read. It's a coming-of-age tale set during the Russian Revolution in which a young woman of privilege ditches her life in order to be a part of the workers' uprising. I always have one eyebrow permanently raised when it comes to Russian historical fiction. I will keep it up there until I know that this author has done her proper research. Then I picked up 4 more SFF-leaning books. The first is a short story collection called Schwimmer Among the Stars by Kanishk Thoreau. I'm not that big of a reader of short stories, but every single story in this collection sounds fantastic. Despondent diplomats entertain themselves by playing table tennis in zero gravity. For after rising seas destroy Manhattan, the United Nations moves to an orbiting space hotel. In other tales, a team of anthropologists treks to a remote village to record a language's last surviving speaker intoning her native tongue. An elephant and his driver cross the ocean to meet the whims of a Moroccan princess. And Genghis Khan's marauding army steadily approaches an unnamed city's walls. Maybe this collection will be the one to get me more into short stories. I also picked up The Bedlam Stacks by Natasha Pulley, which I love if only just because it's a naked hardback and publishers don't make nearly enough of those. After suffering from a crippling injury, an ex-East India Company smuggler is stuck at home indefinitely. That is until the company recruits him to go on a dangerous, ill-advised fetch quest to Peru. I know a lot of people really loved her first novel, The Watchmaker of Filigree Street, so I do anticipate this will be really good. The next one I picked up off of the recommendation of another booktuber, that is The Traitor, Baru Cormorant by Seth Dickinson. I first became interested in this book when I saw James Chatham review this one quite a long time ago. It is a fantasy novel, but it seems like it has a ton of political intrigue. Because of that, I do think I'm really going to enjoy this, although I don't read that much fantasy. I do know that this one is the first book in a series. I believe the second one came out this previous fall. And the last SFF book that I've picked up in recent months is another first book in a series that is called An Alchemy of Masks and Mirrors by Curtis Craddock. This book follows a princess who was born with a physical disability and who is protected by a trusty musketeer who is kind of a father figure to her since he's been around since she was born. She's betrothed to the son of a dying king of an empire that is collapsing into civil war, but this guy's previous 2 fiancés were murdered, and the assassin now has his eyes on our main character. It seems pretty thrilling. Now, I try not to be super shallow when it comes to my book selections, but that certainly doesn't mean that I'm immune to a pretty cover. And I have to say, I am downright obsessed with these Mariner reissues of Anya Seton's historical novels. I think they are gorgeous, and I'm informally working to collect them all. Foxfire is a love story set in the desert southwest of the United States during the Great Depression. The Hearth and Eagle is set at an inn in Massachusetts, and in it we get a history of this inn and of our heroine, Hesper Honeywood. My Theodosia is a fictionalized account of the short life of the daughter of Thomas Jefferson's vice president, Aaron Burr, who is famous for his duel with Alexander Hamilton. And lastly, Green Darkness is a modern tale of the young American wife of an Englishman who suffers from a mental breakdown. She is instructed by a mystic to travel back in time to her previous life in Tudor-era England to relive her past experiences in order to be able to escape them. The next book I picked up when I was out book shopping with the lovely Stephanie over at That's What She Read, that is Middlemarch by George Eliot. I really wanted this Penguin Classics Deluxe Edition. I think it's so gorgeous. This was one of my favorite fiction reads of 2018, and yet I didn't have my own copy of it. So I'm really excited to have this. I am going to be deep diving into this, annotating all over the place, and I can't wait. And then I found this Reader's Digest edition of Silas Mariner at a used bookstore. I love these Reader's Digest editions. They are so well made, and they are illustrated. I have 2 up there. If you can see, I have one of Jane Eyre and one of Rebecca. I did have Emma, but I didn't really care for that book, so I got rid of that one. I've really loved all the George Eliot books that I've picked up so far, so I feel pretty confident in collecting all of her works, so this one can be crossed off that list. And then the last book that I have to show you in this fiction section of my two-part book haul is The Professor's House by Willa Cather. Willa Cather is definitely a name that I've heard before, but I've never felt inspired to pick up any of her books until I read the description of this one. It's about a professor in his 50s in a Midwestern university town in the 1920s. He has achieved success in just about every aspect of his life, but when he is asked to move to another house, a better one in fact, he is forced to confront not only change, but also all the different disappointments he has had with his life. I don't know, something about this book just really called out to me. It seemed really beautiful and really poignant, and something that I would probably relate to more now that I am beginning to get older. So those are all the fiction books that I have picked up recently. If you missed the nonfiction section of this haul, I will put a link for you down in the description box below and up in the cards to that video. I am going to be slowing down a little bit on book acquisitions over the next 2 or so months. I want to read some of these books on my shelves to make room for new books, but when library book sale season kicks off again in the spring, I probably will have another haul for you. If you've read any of these books, if you've heard about them, or you're now interested in reading them after hearing me talk about them, I would love to hear from you in the comment section below. But you can also put any other comments or questions you may have there as well. But if you'd prefer to reach out to me somewhere other than YouTube, I am on a variety of different places on social media. I will put a link to all of my profiles down in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.